Welcome to our classic car, and this, the fourth collection of 150 photographs featuring classic British saloon cars of the 1950s and 1960s. All the classic British cars shown were photographed by myself over the last few years, with many of the family favourites such as Austins, Morrises, MGs, Jaguars and Triumphs, to name just a few, included. Okay, and to begin with we have a Austin Mini from 1961, BAS 647. Followed by a 1966 Ford Anglia 105e rally car. VSL 675, that's a Ford Prefect 100e. And here we have a 1966 Ford Anglia 105e. This is the first of several Austins to feature in this video, an A40 Somerset ESL 189 from 1953. And this is a Daimler V8 250. The 2.5 litre V8 car. Next, a late example of the Austin A40 Farina Mark II Countryman with a lift-up rear window, and a very original looking Bentley T1 based on the Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. And then next we have a Rover P4, an ESL 188, which is an Austin A50 Cambridge from 1958. Very sad looking Morris Minor Series 2 and a Rover P6 in the Portuguese scrapyard. And an Austin Mini Cooper, a Mark II. This is a 1953 Sunbeam Talbot 90 Mark IIA, apparently used on the Monte Carlo Rally, and this is a Jaguar 420. Next up we have a standard Vanguard Phase 1 and an Austin A40 Farina Mark I. In the foreground is a Vauxhall Viva HA, while behind is a Morris 1800. And this is a Ford Cortina Mark II 4-door saloon. And continuing with the British saloons of the 1950s and 60s, we have a left-hand drive Ford Consul Classic. And this is a Jaguar Mark II, race-prepared example down at Goodwood. And a Triumph Vitesse Mark II. This is the Somerset's big brother. This is the Austin A70 Hereford LDA 276. Followed by a 4-door Ford Cortina Mark II, the 1600E executive model. And a side view of a race-prepared Anglia 105E. And here, a 1965 Triumph Herald. Back to the 1950s, an NFH 527, that's a Hillman Minx saloon. And a Lotus Cortina Mark I, seen at the Donington Historic Festival a few years back. Now a Morris Mini Cooper S from 1966 on reverse rim steel wheels. And another Mini, this is a Swiss registered Mark I, seen at the Goodwood Revival in 2015. Next, a side view of a Ford Cortina Mark I 4-door saloon. And another Cortina Mark I, this time a 2-door, done up in the livery of Glam Cabs from Carry On Cabby, I think it was. And this is a Sunbeam Talbot 80. We've seen a 90, and there'll be another one later, but this is a Sunbeam Talbot 80, an XEH 622, that's a standard 10 from 1955. The rear 3/4 view of a Mark II Ford Zephyr. And a head-on view of NUF 865G, which is a Jaguar 240 from 1968. Then a pair of Austin A40 Somersets in the Welsh scrapyard. A Ford Anglia 105e from 1965, bonnet raised. And a Vanden Plas 1300. And the rear view now of the Morris 1800 Mark II. This was down at the British Motor Museum at Gaydon. XMA 766 was a standard 10 of the mid-1950s. Well, back to Gaydon and the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Collection and their S-Type Jaguar with a Mark 1 alongside. And also at Gaydon, a Rover 2000 P6 from 1965. A 64 Mini Cooper, Austin Mini Cooper S. And a Sunbeam Talbot 90 KAW373, Shropshire registration there. This is a Vanden Plas 4 Litre R. And the good old Morris Minor 1000, circa 1967. A two-door saloon. And an Austin A60 Cambridge in two-tone grey. To the early 1950s now, the Lanchester LD10, the Briggs-bodied car. While here we've got a Triumph Vitesse Mark II saloon, complete with no-tech spot lamps on the front. And a race-prepared Hillman Minx. Looking somewhat dejected is a Ford Prefect 100E, the four-door saloon. While PYR1 is anything but a 1955 Bentley Continental, a magnificent car. XMB 37 is an Austin A50 Cambridge of 1956. And here we've got a Cortina Lotus Mark II in the livery of Alan Mann Racing Limited. And here, the Austin Metropolitan. WWT 723, that's an Austin A35 from 1958, with the larger 1098 engine fitted, and this is a 1964 Triumph Herald saloon. The Mark I Austin A40 Farina. And BAS 337, that's a 1955 Vauxhall Wyvern. And a Mark II Ford Consul. The Morris Minor 1000 in rally car configuration. The Ford Escort Mark I Mexico. The 1600 GT on mini light wheels. And an early Wolseley 1500. The early cars have these small white side lamps on the front. The later cars are like the Morris Minor. Here's another 105E. .678 UXE, that's a 1954 Standard 8 with the wind-up windows. The first cars had sliding windows front and rear. While here we've got an Austin A30. Staying with Austin, this is an A55 Cambridge Mark II, and a very jolly two-tone colour scheme. And on a classic car run a few years ago, we followed this Vanden Plas Princess 3 Litre saloon. Here's a 64 Vauxhall Victor FB. There's an MG Y-Type saloon. And a tiled example of the Ford Anglia E494A. KRW621, that's a 1951 Jaguar Mark 7. And here MTT466, that's a 1950 Vauxhall Wyvern, one of the L series cars. And back to Gaydon, we've got a Daimler Regency Sportsman Saloon from 1955. And still at Gaydon, another example of the Y-Type MG Saloon. Then we've got a Vauxhall PA Velox. An FPH41B, which is a 1964 Austin A40 Farina Mark II on Spridget wheels. And Moth 859, that's a 1952 Riley RM 1.5 litre saloon. The Sunbeam Rapier, being exercised on historic rally. VKB 953H is a Singer Chamois from 1970. There's an Austin Westminster racing car. This is a 1954 Humber Hawk, been laid up in a garage for a long time. The Ford V8 Pilot. an MG Magnet 456 AVO, and the Jowett Javelin Saloon with Morris 1000 front indicators on it. Talking of Morris 1000s, here are a pair of them, the rearmost car being a police car. And here's 46 HTJ, which is a 1959 Hillman Minx with a Vitesse or a Herald alongside, and this is the Austin 3 litre. They didn't sell very many back in the day, and you don't see them too often now. We've got a Jaguar 420G in the foreground alongside a couple of E-types. There's a Morris Oxford MO. The Lee Francis 14-horse saloon, circa 1950-51 I would have thought. There's a Riley 1.5 with the 1.5 litre B series engine, twin carburettors. TSG 346, that's a 1959 Wolseley 1560, very smart car with the big fins. And then we've got an Armstrong Siddeley Sapphire 346 from 1955. The sad remains of a Morris Minor 1000. Austin A60 Cambridge. The Ford Consul Mark II in the foreground, and a Mark II Zephyr convertible alongside it. Carrying on with these British saloons of the 50s and 60s, we've got an Austin A90 Atlantic, designed for the American market but didn't really sell. The VBP 916, we've got a rear view of this 1956 Vauxhall Cresta. There's a Mark II Ford Cortina, a four-door saloon. Another 105 Anglia, looking a little sorry for itself. A fairly early Austin 1800 saloon, with a Super Minx estate alongside. A pair of Rover P6s, the later car in the foreground, the earlier car in the background. A Wolseley 680, beloved of police forces in 1950s movies. And a race-prepared standard Vanguard Mark III, or Phase 3. There's a Mark III Ford Zodiac. And there's the yellow P6, the Rover 2000 TC for twin carburettors. And Pt4 that's a 1968 Jaguar XJ6 4.2, Sir William Lyons' old car. And here, a brace of Vauxhall Victors. A very fine Humber Super Snipe. I tried to buy one identical to that 20 years ago. Here's a review of Ford Consul Mark II GSU 690 with a Triumph 1500, just about visible. There's an Austin A55 Cambridge, the Mark I car pre-Farina. Another derelict Ford Prefect 100E. This left-hand drive car was in Portugal. Now we've got a Wolseley 1660. We had a 1560 earlier on. Tox 1, that's a 1958 Jaguar 3.4 litre saloon. There's another Wolseley 1500, a black example. Great little cars, B series engine. And this is a Wolseley, a 1965 Wolseley 6110. A Ford Anglia E494A, shinier version of my car. Mo 611F, that's a Jaguar 240 of 1968. There's a 1966 Herald. And we've got a Jaguar Mark II down at the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust Collection at Gaydon. XKL7, that's an Austin A95 Westminster from 1956. And an immaculate Singer Vogue. Really smartly turned out example. The Ford Zephyr 6 Mark I, ex-1953 Monte Carlo Rally. And here's NGH 536, a big old Armstrong Siddeley from 1952. GSG 808, 308 or 808, that's a Riley Pathfinder. There's another early Wolseley 1500. A four-door Cortina Mark I from 1966, a Cortina Super no less. There's that Lee Francis 14 again, with the MG magnet alongside. 325 FMG, nice black standard 10, with a P6 V8 behind it, and a Vauxhall Viva HA in grey, on a very rainy show field somewhere. This is a Vanden Plas 4 Litre R from 1964. A V8 Ford Pilot RHK 980, a very fetching shade of green. This is a four-door Ford Cortina Mark I GT on later wheels. And USL 559, that's a 1954 Vauxhall Velox. Next, a mid-green coloured Ford Prefect E493A. The Triumph Vitesse Mark II, a 2 litre car. YEE 645, that's a 1964 Alvis TE21. Back to Sunbeam Talbot and a very well turned out 90. And this is the Ford Consul Capri, based on the Consul Classic Saloon. A slightly muddy front wheel drive Triumph 1300. And a mid to late 50s Morris Oxford, pre-Farina Oxford. And a Morris 1100, sat doing very little. And a Riley 1.5, a two-tone example. A really smart Austin A40 Somerset, complete with period sun visor and no-tech spot lamps on the front. There's an old Daimler Conquest, used in historic road rallies. There's a Mark IV Ford Zodiac. An Austin 1800 rally car. Not too many classic cars left now. We've got an Austin A35. And a very rare standard Ensign from 1962. And the standard rounds out this fourth collection of classic British saloon cars of the 1950s to 1960s. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.